Hello, I'm Cynthia Rickard. Welcome to the Scribbler Podcast. Today, I and three other area female professionals, fellow retired journalist Mona Alexander, content producer Meg Christensen, and Youngstown State professor and sometimes Scribbler co-host Taji Terrell, will be discussing the political phenomenon known as JD Vance. I have to give it to him. In his relatively brief sojourn from the night just 2 years ago when our Scribbler founder Bertram de Souza went viral for calling him Donald Trump's ass kisser, immortalizing Trump's own words, to today, Vance has managed to insult childless women, working women, abused women, childless couples, adopted children, adoptive parents, stepchildren, step-parents, Appalachians, immigrants, children of immigrants, non-native spouses of Americans, his fellow veterans, a female Arlington National Cemetery worker, cat owners, and by extension of failing to refute his running mate's racist, misogynistic, and xenophobic remarks and beliefs, trans people, biracial people, all non-whites are founding fathers by supporting Trump's dismissal of the Constitution, and anyone who dares to believe their own eyes and ears or mind over his. So just about 100% of Americans. It's quite a resume for a hillbilly, as he calls himself, who likes to claim both Ohio and Kentucky as his own, and who had absolutely no experience in governance before his mentor, gay California tech billionaire and PayPal founder Peter Thiel, hand-selected him to promote his venture capital business interests at the highest level of government in the world. So, ladies, welcome. I'm going to start by asking you to name, if you have one, your favorite JD Vance insult or meme, as they inevitably followed on social media. So, Mona, should we start with you?
This is a quote,
Okay.
not a meme, but I think it's very fitting for the discussion. Mr. Trump is unfit for our nation's highest office.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Did you have one, Taji?
Yeah. I actually don't really follow him much.
It's probably better for your mental health.
I mean, I truly didn't know about him until I heard about his comment on childless cat ladies. And that's,
And
that's
that caught your
one thing
eye.
I know. And
But you have
yeah,
no
that's,
cats.
I don't have any cats, but I'm childless, so yeah. I mean, I took some offense to it.
Yeah.
I just saw one where somebody had made a sticker and it said, "I did not have sectional relations with that couch." And I was like, I need this for my car.
I forgot about the couch. Episode.
I never
That's
quite
really-
understood the couch. I gotta be
I
completely
never
honest.
quite understood it either, but he apparently made the remark somewhere along the line, so it's
It
been
was
on.
in his hillbilly elegy.
Is that
He
where it
talks
was?
About like how like he finds out that all the groomsmen in this one wedding he's in all had this singular experience of like they got a little bit lonely and
made out with the couch.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, the nighttime comics have just been making hay of that one.
Yeah.
Well, I have two. One is the most deranged and psychotic people are those people who have no children. And then his suggestions that all kids should have a vote, except the vote would be controlled by their parents. So I'm not sure if he's talking about adult children, but I have a feeling he's probably definitely talking about even pregnant women because they have decided that that handful of cells at conception deserves the same rights as a full-grown human being. So those all are notable, I have to say. Well, Vance has climbed on the MAGA train that's pushing for a white, nationalist, isolationist, Christian-ruled America entitled to tell others how to live, who to love, what to read, how to educate, and when and how to have a family. I want to focus on his support for MAGA's restrictive immigration policies and apparent disdain for our ever-growing multicultural society, and against his fundamentalist Christian beliefs after converting to Catholicism just 5 years ago. In relation to his wife, Usha, and their biracial children. Usha is a practicing Hindu. And I wonder how you all feel about his tepid defense of her and their marriage in the face of the online criticism of that, because there was quite a bit of backlash when people found out that she was Indian American and that they have a middle child named Vivek. And also the reciting of a Sikh prayer at the RNC, because there was some backlash about that again. So I'm just curious to know how you guys feel about this, because I think it's very progressive for conservatives and even for Donald Trump to entertain someone who has a biracial wife and biracial children, especially with all of the criticisms that's been going around. So,
Who's been criticizing him and his wife?
there's been backlash online, and mostly it's been from conservatives. Certainly the progressives haven't been criticizing it. But there has been conservative backlash. And there was one, his name's Fuentes, and he was talking about it during an interview, sort of saying, basically they don't trust anyone who is not American-born and full-blood American, even though all of us came from immigrant roots at some point or other. But, these are rather fresh, so they're getting some backlash about that. And she actually addressed it during a recent interview that a reporter on Fox did with her, which I thought was really well done, and talked about how they, she kind of tries to kind of look above that. It almost sounded like Michelle Obama, we go high kind of thing. So yeah, I just wonder if and I didn't watch the RNC, but I've seen clips of it. I've been watching a little bit of it online. So I didn't actually see this, and I didn't see the recitation of the Sikh prayer, but it was fairly unusual for any political convention to have a Hindu prayer recited.
It doesn't sound like the criticism has gotten a ton of traction. That would be my first observation. And the second is, it would be a little bit surprising to me if even the Conservative Party leadership would push that line, because they need to embrace this guy, and this guy is their guy, and he lines up with their beliefs.
He does now.
Yeah. So you're saying that initially he didn't, when he was initially selected, that was...
Well, I'm not sure. He probably did when he's initially selected. But some years ago, and I don't know if any of you have seen this or not, but this trans, I think he's a lawyer, I think he's a trans man, but her name is Sophia Nelson. And she gave an interview to the New York Times, because they were very, very close friends during their Yale years. And she says that she has seen, based on the emails that they exchanged and letters, she was at their wedding, so she knew both of them at Yale. And she says that he has completely flip-flopped from the man that she knew at Yale. And they were apparently really close. And he has responded to her exposing those or releasing those emails. She's had some criticism about that, but he responded kind of, in a very diplomatic way, saying, that he'll always care about her, kind of thing, and kind of brushed it off.
He's flip-flopped since 2021,
Yeah.
so that, and what is troubling to me, and I'm speaking in very general terms, it doesn't seem to matter anymore.
I know.
We sit here and we point out, well, he's flip-flopped. Okay, there's such a large part of the base that just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And these are in part people who get their news from headlines on TikTok and Facebook, which, as I am adamantly opposed to. But I think that people just really don't care anymore, and that doesn't mean that this group shouldn't be here as journalists, holding politicians accountable. I can't think of a time when what we do is more important.
Yeah.
It's critical, but what we need to do as journalists is really kind of sort the wheat from the chaff. We've got to make sure that our reporting is as accurate as it could possibly be. And before we started recording, I told you that in doing my research for the panel today, I looked into some of his Vance's, just the really out there comments that he made, like, kind of implying that, rape is acceptable. What was the quote? It wasn't acceptable, but it's, it's inconvenient. Rape is inconvenient. And what the implication was that, hey, you got to have if you get pregnant as a result of a rape, it's inconvenient, but you got to have that baby anyway. Is sort of what they were saying, but that really isn't what he said. And I dug up the quote, and the quote, well, hey, let me read it. Society should not view the pregnancy or the birth as inconvenient.
Oh.
So that's what he said. And when I read that, I thought, well, maybe he's trying to take the stigma away from a child that is born as a result of a rape or incest. It doesn't matter ultimately because he is not pro-choice.
Right.
And so, ultimately it doesn't matter as far as your support or opposition to Vance. It does matter if you're consuming media. Right. Because it has a cumulative effect. If you keep just consuming information that's not accurate, how do you really make a decision as to how you're going to vote, particularly if you're undecided? And we can get into that a little bit later if you want to, but the undecideds in this election, what they're calling the, like the persuadables, they're calling them. They're not insignificant in this election. I thought they were, because everybody I talk to and interact with, they know how they're going to vote. But there's like around, according to some news ops, there's like around a 7%. And that's, if the last election was won by 5%, and I think it might have even been a little bit closer, that's not insignificant.
Yeah.
So, Vance, love him or hate him, the media needs to do a better job of being more accurate in reporting what he was saying.
The one thing that, I suppose in terms of talking about somebody flip-flopping, if they don't want their side to be talked about, then they shouldn't be talking about the other side that way, and it's happening. They don't want to accept the criticism of themselves, but they want to. I mean, they're plastering it on Kamala Harris, because she made some decisions while she was DA in California that she's changed on, and most lately on the fracking and that kind of stuff. But with Vance, from what I've read of him and seen of him on video, I mean, and from what his friends have said, it's sort of not like an evolution of belief or ideas by accumulating more information or starting to understand a particular issue better. It's more that he, like Trump, turned from pro-choice to absolutely anti-choice.
Political expediency.
Right. Exactly. And that's sort of what bothers me about Vance, is that I'm not sure who he is really, particularly since his close friends from Yale are now coming out and saying, this is not the man that we knew. This is what he believed, and now they can't even be friends with him.
But you brought up Kamala Harris and her flipping on the fracking. She's doing that to try and win Pennsylvania.
Right.
So it doesn't, like you said, both sides are doing it, so both sides need to accept the criticism. But I get your point about Vance, flipping so quickly. When I was doing my research, I just, story after story after story said, but in 2021, and that's what happened. He said, ooh, I'm from a red state now. I'm in Ohio, and I got an actual shot at running for U.S. Senate. So I'm going to have to go this way if I want his endorsement. And he did it, and he got it, and he won. So, I think we all know what happened there.
Yeah. Well, he also got a lot of money.
Yes.
In Silicon
Valley.
From
Peter Thiel.
And some other cohorts of Thiel's. Because they really want him in the White House.
Yes. Right. They do.
I don't know. I remember the debate that they did, when Bertram got so much publicity about that. And I thought at the time, there's no way that he's going to beat Tim Ryan. I just thought there was just no way. I mean, particularly this area didn't know him well enough. But I think he, by attaching himself to Trump's coattails at the time is what pushed him over, because this area has, and I still don't understand that. And it's happening again in this election, where Trump came in and said, "Don't sell your houses. We're going to either rebuild those mills or tear them down and build new ones." And that didn't happen. GM closed, and now he's saying the same thing on the campaign trail, not in just this state, but in other states. And I feel like it's kind of deja vu. It's sort of like, as you said, people forget.
People forget
so quickly.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking about some of the things that happened during Trump's presidency. And I mentioned that book that I was reading, and it just reminded me of all the things that happened with Bob Mueller, his interference with Russia, or Russian interference, and his cooperation with them and trying to help them with their corruption in return for whatever, we don't know. So I feel like people forget about those things. People forget about all of his claims that never came true before the last election. And now we're here again.
Yeah. And he's doing it in other states, and when we're hearing the same kind of rhetoric everywhere.
And I don't think he actually means to do many of the things that he offers and he promises people about. Even the mass deportation that he talks about, I really don't think he wants to do it. He just thinks that that's going to get people all riled up.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because you are a native of Turkey, and I
American citizen, but
American citizen,
Turkish.
American citizen, yeah, of course. But you still have family there, so.
Absolutely.
I have a friend who's also a foreigner who says that they're not going to vote because it just doesn't matter. And I'm just wondering if you feel that way, because I know you made a lot of remarks during one of our previous podcasts about the comparisons between what's happening here now and what happened in Turkey. So I'm wondering, if you feel that your friends here are at risk of being deported if he and Vance get in, or if you feel pretty confident that it's not going to happen.
Well, so he claims that he's going to deport illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
But of course we know that he just doesn't like immigrants in general who are a certain color or a certain race. He made it very clear. And I don't have any friends who are illegal immigrants, really, but there are people who are not really sure about how that will affect. I mean, I think the major concern of a lot of my friends, I mean, most of them are American citizens.
Do you know any who have green cards, or?
I do know people who have green cards.
Do they feel at risk?
They are trying to apply for their citizenship as soon as possible, because they feel like if Trump is the president, the process may get longer. Or if they have family who wants to visit and they need to get a tourist visa, it may be an issue, so they need to get their visas in before the election. But I have to tell you this, in Turkey, in the last election, a lot of conservative Turkish people voted for Trump. And the reason was because they thought Trump was better for Turkey. And they, I've heard a lot of news about Trump taking money from certain Turkish politicians, and I'm sure he's doing that with Russians or other countries and promising them things. So personally, if I hated America, and if I wanted their democracy to be destroyed, I would probably just vote for Trump and then move to Europe. I think that's how it is.
That solves that problem.
I think that's how it is, but I don't think people realize that. And a lot of immigrants that I know of, I mean, who are American citizens, they also mention that they're going to vote for Trump, which surprises me because I think they don't believe that he's going to deport anybody, and they either don't understand what Trump is about, or they don't really follow the news, or they think he's fun. I mean, somebody made a comment to me that he's fun, he's funny, and they're going to vote for him. So it's such a confusing situation.
You two are younger than we are. What do your friends say about this? Because I mean, I think you're still at the age where they're probably getting some news through traditional outlets, not just online.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they actually still follow politics, because it is, our news has become so diluted with all of these outlets that it's kind of difficult to keep up with everything. So people kind of pick one or two things, and that's what influences them. But what are your friends saying about?
Well, I'm kind of a closet liberal amongst a lot of my friends because, well, I grew up in a very conservative Christian background and went to a conservative private Christian university. So a lot of my friends at church or from from university or whatever are all, well, not all, but for the most part, very, very conservative. That being said, my parents, interestingly, who were dyed-in-the-wool, like Reagan, Republicans, will always vote Republican, have done a complete 180 and are like, we can't ever do, vote Republican anymore.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
they're from Columbiana County, or are they from Mahoning?
My parents?
Yeah.
Well, we live in Mahoning Valley.
Okay.
But, my mom's from Tennessee and my dad grew up outside of Mansfield.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So your mom's kind of a Southerner.
Oh, yeah. And she is, she is loud and proud. I mean, I've been very proud of her, and, she's taken a lot of umbrage against some of the claims, said, especially, me being childless myself, and JD Vance saying some of these things and saying, kind of denigrating and saying,
Yes,
women
well,
who
I'm
don't
wearing
have children,
my proud childless cat lady.
Yeah, exactly.
attire today.
That we have no place, that we, in society, that we don't have, basically saying that nothing that we do matters if we don't have children. And
we pay more taxes.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
But he went farther than that. Vance did, because he criticized the president of a teachers union, who says she's in a gay marriage, and she says she has children by marriage. So she's basically a stepmom. And he said that she should. Instead of indoctrinating our kids, if she wants to brainwash and destroy the minds of children, she should have some of her own and leave ours the hell alone. I mean.
Well, and then he backs off. He doubles down and he backs off by saying, well, that was sarcasm.
It was a joke.
It was a joke. This is what happened with the video that he put on, I think, X, of the Miss Teen Ohio.
Oh my God, yeah.
And just, help me with this, but for the audience's benefit, this was the young woman who many years ago was in a Miss Teen Ohio contest, and she just flubbed it.
Yeah.
She just flubbed it, and then she flubbed it again, and it was horrific.
She kind of had a Joe Biden moment during the questioning.
And I'm somebody who's worked with young people on camera, and I know how that feels when they completely flub and they come into your office and they're in tears, and it's a traumatic experience, and you're sitting there going, you know what, I'm going to make you feel better, but I know this is something you're never really going to forget.
Right. Yeah.
So taking that and then putting it out and saying, this is kind of, was he comparing it to Joe Biden, I think?
I don't know if he compared it. He might have.
He
I don't
compared
remember
it to
that.
somebody,
I was just
or
so
Kamala
shocked.
had a moment.
Yeah,
or somebody
I was
had
so shocked that he actually put this poor woman back on the
Right.
stage.
And then he got caught by, I think it was, I can't remember the CNN anchor's name, but he got caught with the anchor saying, did you know that she said that she actually contemplated suicide after that? That's when and he's very good at this. Vance is very, very good at this. He's like, while my heart goes out to Christy or Kristen, I don't want to say her name wrong, that's absolutely horrible. But we need to be able to joke in politics
and
a little bit.
he even said, but I'm not going to apologize for a joke.
He said, I'm not going to apologize for a joke. Exactly.
It
right.
didn't sound like a joke to me.
Yeah, it was unfortunate.
Which was my point about saying that he sort of wants to deny whatever we're hearing and seeing for ourselves. He wants us to believe that, oh well, that was a joke and I feel for her. But never, that was pretty serious. That she
So, a question I would have is, has it gone too far? Because is he a liability on the ticket? Is a question that I would have.
There was a lot of talk about whether he was going to get dropped.
Right, there was.
I don't see any indication of that, though.
I don't see any indication of that. There is some talk about how deadlines in a number of states, including Ohio, have passed. I don't think, though, that they really care about that. I think that if Trump doesn't want him, he'll fire him, he'll bring somebody new on board and tell his voters to do a write-in. So I don't kind of take the Ohio election laws all that seriously as far as them making that kind of decision.
Right.
But as you said, there's just been no indication.
Yeah.
And so as we talk about all of this, you have to ask yourself, why?
Yeah.
Well, it's not affecting the base. That's why. And so now we go back to those persuadables. Who is it going to affect? We don't want to be an echo chamber here and just say whatever we all may think or not think, as the case may be. But you have to wonder, is he a liability on the ticket?
Yeah. It doesn't seem that he is. Number one, he went to Yale, and he and he grew a beard, so he looks better. And he's pretty well spoken on the trail.
Yeah, very well spoken. Yeah. Probably the best of the candidates on both sides.
Yeah. And he supports Trump, unapologetically and without any exceptions. And he's got a beautiful wife, who, despite the fact that the far right has been criticizing her biracial identity, after watching her speak and be interviewed, she's far beyond him. It would have been a much more even race had she been running against Kamala Harris. She's amazing.
I think that's why he's trying to denigrate women, because he is so aware that women have so much power and they're so capable, probably from his own wife, and he's afraid of them.
He does speak very highly of her. And he did say that he's very proud of her, and that was his kind of response to the criticism of her, of her. But the one thing that they aren't talking about, which is surprising to me, which I haven't seen come out, is her religion. Because with all of this movement in the country, as a non-Christian myself, I'm pretty aware of how strong this has become. With all of the talk of this needs to be a Christian nation and the move toward theocracy, I'm surprised that her faith has not gotten more press or more or more.
I don't see her too much on the campaign trail. Is she out there campaigning actively for him?
I don't. They've got 3 kids at home and they're young,
and they're
so
little.
probably not. Yeah, probably not.
Right.
Yeah. But I want to go back to one of the questions that I was going to ask you. Let me ask you this one first. I'm having a hard time figuring out what his policy proposals are. Have any of you identified them? Is he just on Trump's coattails? Has he said anything about any of the policies that would differ from what Trump has proposed? I hear generalizations a lot about, Trump says he's going to finish the wall, close the border, deport millions, and he always says that the economy was better when I was in office. And I've said this before, his tax cut gave me about $1.55 more in my paycheck.
And it's going to end soon.
Well, it did. I mean, it ended when when the paper closed, and so I became involuntarily retired. But
No, but I mean, the tax credit that he gave is going to end soon. So
yeah, but he's talking about giving more, and I fear that it's going to benefit the billionaires again more than it's going to benefit people like us.
The only thing that I found, Cynthia, is that Vance supports a $5,000 tax credit per child.
Oh,
And that's a good thing.
That is a
You know,
good thing.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
He is against universal child care.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I don't understand that. He's got 3 young kids, so is his
Well-
point that
It's expensive. I think that's probably what, for the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
it's expensive. I think that's probably what it is. And he's also opposed to no-fault divorce.
yes.
And I thought that was interesting because, and I'm reminding you what Megan said about her Republican parents, not the same Republicans that we have today as her parents were coming up and being conservative Republicans, because in 1969, Ronald Reagan, conservative Republican in the old school way, signed into law the first no-fault divorce in California.
he was divorced?
And it went across the rest of the country, and it is the law of the land. And what it says, again, for you guys know this, but for the audience, that means before no-fault divorce, you had to prove that you needed to get divorced. There had to be abandonment or alcoholism or assault.
And somebody
or-
had to accuse the other.
Right.
One partner had to accuse the other of something.
exactly. And it had to be,
have
you had to go to
evidence.
court, and it had to be proven, and it was
Yes.
long and laborious and expensive and all of that.
And embarrassing and hurtful to the
Yes,
kids.
exactly.
And, yeah.
Right. And so no fault divorce kind of eliminated all of that. And so I can't not figure out why the opposition, or where the opposition to that is coming.
Well, certainly, I don't know this. Did you find anything of this? But I cannot imagine that Trump supports that point of view.
I did not find
He's on his 3rd wife, for God's sakes. And the first one's married on his golf course under some overgrown weeds, from what I could see in the photos that I've seen.
If I remember correctly, because I remember that interview where he was, or who did that? I do remember an interview where he was talking about his justification for taking away the no-fault divorce, and he was saying, well, once I converted to Catholicism and I married my wife, I had never really had a good structural family, and with my wife, I now know how good it is to have a family, and I think every American needs to have that. And I feel like we're just tossing away the foundation of family if anybody can just get, I'm paraphrasing here, if anybody can just get a divorce for whatever
You're right.
reason.
You're right. This was the
And-
changing
Yes.
partners like underwear comment that he made.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. That's right. I remember that. And
Right.
but I just my mind is screaming, and I'm trying to.
Well, we all know women who've been in abusive
coherent.
relationships.
Well,
They
that's,
need to,
is that
yeah,
what you're
right.
is that what you're leaning toward?
Right.
Because
And
Right.
like the whole, there's a lot of, I mean, I've never been in abusive relationships, but I've tried to learn what I can, and there's so much about like coercive behavior and things that aren't necessarily readily proven. You can't necessarily show I have these, marks around my neck, or I have a black eye, or I have broken ribs. But if a man takes away your car keys and takes away your cell phone and says
and threatens
you're
to
just
kill
going
your pets if
yes,
you
your
leave,
pets
or take your
anything
kids.
like that, or you're
Yeah.
going to burn your parents' house
Yeah.
down, or things like that. I mean, like, how do you prove those things?
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to go back and see, because it's been a while since I read this, but I feel, let me look this up, but I think that there was actually a reduction in suicides because
I read that too. Yeah, I read that as well.
I just
Yeah.
can't remember what the actual
Right.
rate was, but I
Right.
do remember that they were saying that there was a reduction in suicides with the no-fault divorce.
No
because,
fault divorce.
You know, people could get out of these bad situations that you couldn't prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And so I just.
Well, I think his upbringing has really, influenced everything that he's doing today.
Yes.
Have any of you read his book?
No.
Did any of you watch the movie?
I started watching it. I heard about the book also after his
Yeah.
comments. I started to do some research on him. I started to watch the movie. I just couldn't finish it. It was
I got
just
through the first 10
Same,
minutes.
same.
yeah.
I couldn't watch it
Is
either.
it just a bad movie, or was it the
Well,
message?
It's. I think a friend of mine actually watched the whole thing, and he said to me, he really had a tough life. And from what I've read, I've read about the movie and about the book, and he did have a horribly
Yes.
tough life.
Yes.
Was raised mostly by his grandmother. And Glenn Close, who I really like as an actress, plays his grandmother. She looks like a hag.
Yeah.
You cannot recognize her in the film. But at the RNC, I watched his speech, and at the RNC, his mother was there.
Yes, 10
And-
years sober too.
Yeah, 10 years sober, and he wants her to celebrate in the White House. And he recognized her, so they obviously have made amends over
Right.
the years.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that a lot of what he's talking about with this get rid of the no-fault divorce has to do with that. The other quote that, and maybe you've seen this because I'm not quite sure that they've gotten it right. They were saying that he was saying that women should stay in abusive marriages.
Oh,
And
I do have something on
Yeah,
that.
and I don't think that's actually
No,
what
no.
he said.
No.
But if you, what he did say, sort of affects women more than it would affect men. Those kinds of marriages. So that's, I think, where it came from.
It doesn't, it doesn't make a difference if it's attached to a policy. If his policy doesn't change, that's my point. I'm all for accuracy in the media because I want people to really distill the information
Yeah.
and say, I'm not going to attach that much weight to this because I really don't think that he said what they said he said. So I'm going to give that half a point or minus a point or whatever. Do the heavy work, but
Yeah.
we've got to do our job as journalists for people in order to have as information as unbiased as possible. But ultimately, if you tweak it this way or that way and say, oh, okay, now I get what he said. If it doesn't change his policy, it doesn't change his policy.
Yeah, and the bottom line is, I'm not sure how much influence the president or vice president could have on that kind of social policy.
Right, exactly. Right.
By themselves.
Right.
There would have to be.
Right, that no-fault divorce that's not going. That's a non-starter.
that's not going.
not going anywhere.
Right,
No.
yeah.
There's too many men who get divorced.
Yes, that would really hurt men more than it would hurt women, I think, because they're
right.
still paid more than women, so they always bring in more to the household, most households, than the women do. So yeah, they would be hurt more. Well, the question that I really wanted to get to was on both sides. The campaign today is, last campaign Biden was talking about saving the soul of the nation. And in this campaign, I hear both sides talking about saving democracy. But on Vance's side, and he seems to be supporting everything that's going, is Project 2025.
Right.
And on the Democrats' side, they're talking about saving our rights and freedom, which is a little bit different. The Republicans seem to have their own view of what their democracy is going to look
Philosophical.
like. And the Democrats are pointing to Project 2025 as, if they get into power. I mean, some of the stuff that is in Project 2025 has been in the making for some time, right? But if they get back into the White House, they will be able to implement a lot more of what they've got. And the Democrats are talking about, women losing their rights, which, since Trump's Supreme Court, and I'm going to call it his Supreme Court because he has just absolutely stacked it. His and McConnell's. McConnell's the one who refused to let Garland even get a hearing. But since they overturned Roe, women have lost their rights, and we did. You probably watched some of it, but we did that whole series of podcasts with gynecologists who told us before Roe fell that this is what was going to happen. Families were going to be affected. Women were really going to be affected, and now we're getting all these horror stories from across the country. So I'm wondering if any of you, how you feel about the threat of losing America's democracy through this upcoming election.
Well, sometimes it sounds so outrageous, and you always think, oh, that's never going to happen. But it always happens. I mean, with experience, I can talk about, some of the things that I thought in Turkey it would never happen. But
how old were you when this was taking place there?
Well,
were you pre-college
I was in the U.S. when Erdogan got elected in Turkey.
Okay.
And a lot of people were warning, like people now are warning about Trump. And I didn't think that he was such a threat. I was like, okay, that's never going to happen in Turkey. It's a secular country. He's not going to be able to do that in Turkey, because there were a lot of very secular, staunchly secular groups in Turkey, and I thought they'll never allow that. This is never going to happen, because this is not what our population is. But especially after being in power for over 20 years now, by destroying checks and balances, he's now able to do a lot of things. And you were mentioning, they may not be able to do those things without the Congress and the Senate, but it will happen over time.
Yes.
And once a country starts going backwards, it's so hard to move it back.
Stop it.
On track.
And that's the fear of Project 2025, is because if you read it actually does destroy checks and balances, and it puts most of the power into the executive branch in the president's hands, and puts the DOJ and all of the agencies that are independent right now under his purview. So it is a little bit frightening. But how do you feel about it? Do you see that as an actual threat, or are you sort of?
I don't know yet, I think is the honest answer, because I will read about Project 2025, and I'll really start to try and dig into who are the people behind it, and what their influence is, and how much money they have in order to execute anything. So I'll be reading about that, and then I'll come up with an article that says that there is a hierarchy in the Republican Party that hopes that Kamala Harris wins the election, because if she wins the election, then by a sizable amount, I don't know what sizable would be, maybe 5-7% would be considered a landslide. But if she wins and it's decisive, then they can take a breath and start planning a Republican Party that is post-Donald Trump.
Right.
Because Donald Trump will say, regardless of what it is, he'll say it was stolen and it was fake and all that kind of stuff. But if it's decisive, that becomes harder and harder for him to continue to maintain, and the Republican Party can then move forward and rebuild itself. So I see, on one hand, Project 2025 and what that potentially entails. And I certainly don't support getting rid of all those civil service workers who I think keep the government going when the government shutdown happens, and I don't notice it in my life.
Well,
I think it's because of those.
Yeah, but he's not talking about getting rid of them. He's talking about replacing them with loyalists.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. Thank you for that. So I read that, and then I read about the Republican hierarchy really wanting this to be over, so they can rebuild and not have to go through this drama every 4 years. And I just don't know yet. Is it a concern? Sure, it's a concern. But I just need to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah. How do you feel about it, Meg?
I'm kind of the same way as Mona. I mean, part of my spirit is like, because I've watched enough history documentaries and read enough biographies of around the time of Lenin and Hitler and all of that, that I see parallels, but then I start to think, but am I, doing a confirmation bias? I'm not sure. So I'm still trying to keep a rational head, although it gets harder every day.
Yeah, given that my dad was one of Hitler's POWs, I have a hard time staying unbiased because I do see a lot of similarities from 1939. And then I talked to Taji, who talks about what happened in her country,
and that
makes
interesting.
me.
She's right about the checks and balances
Yes.
when they start to disappear.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and here's the other thing. You talk about. We keep talking about, how what percentage he's going to have to lose by if Kamala is going to be become president. After I retired, I started working at the polls, and along with Ernie Brown, one of our also
Love
former
Ernie
colleagues.
Brown.
Yeah, love Ernie Brown. He was on our last podcast. And we actually, we have to go to training every election, except for the last one because it was, they just got some of us who were experienced because there was only one thing on the ballot, that August special election. And so we're sitting in the room with about 20 or 30 people, and a number of us at the last presidential election asked what kinds of safety precautions are being taken at the polls, because anybody can walk into those places. I've worked at 2 different polling places, and anybody can walk into those places. They aren't supposed to be carrying weapons in there, but there's no. They don't have to walk through any kind of detector, like when you go to the police station or the courthouse or anything. They just walk in. And the elections board workers seemed taken aback that anybody would even ask that. Oh, well, no, we haven't taken any special precautions. And Ernie and I were kind of sitting next to each other going like, like,
You're reporters. We're cynical.
like, are they?
Think it's going to happen?
Yeah, are they reading the news? But anyway, so ever since that election, all of a number of states, I don't have the exact number, I don't remember, but more than a couple have implemented these new voting restrictions. Especially in the South where minorities are complaining. Like first of all, how am I going to get to the polls? And I remember in Texas, they limited the drop box to 1 per county, and that one county is like 100 square miles or something. So they're making it harder and harder to even get to the polls. And then I heard recently that they are probably the Republican, the Trump camp. I'm not sure if it's the whole Republican Party, and I haven't heard Vance say anything about this. Are encouraging more observers to go to these polling places and the drop boxes and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know if you remember, but during the last election, I think it was in Kansas where those people at night were dropping off their votes, and those 2 guys were in a car and they were harassing them. So it's a little bit unnerving to me that she could win, by a landslide, and we would never know about it. I mean, they keep talking about how they don't believe that the election was fair. I'm worried that it's not going to be fair this time because of all of the restrictions that they're placing in front of
about
people.
A lot of safeguards either.
No.
Another thing you're not hearing about is getting the vote out, and it may be because that's going to become critical.
Yeah.
These persuadables, I think, are going to become more critical, and getting the vote out is going to be critical. I think maybe we're just in the news cycle. We're not at the point yet where it's being reported on that what's going to be critical in this election, now that all is said and done, the campaigns are over, the conventions are over, is getting that vote out and how that's going to happen.
Well, and the one restriction I remember was in, I don't know which state it was. I don't know if it was, it had to be, I don't know, Georgia, the Carolinas, someplace. But you have to drop your vote off in person. Like you can't send a family member, even an invalid. I mean, how does that, I don't know how that, how does that work, and why hasn't there been more, backlash
Well, if you have
about
an
that?
absentee ballot, there's nobody who checks when you drop it in the box. So
Right.
are they going to have people now checking whether you're dropping your own envelope?
Just goes to the board of
well,
elections, I guess.
not in Ohio, but
Oh.
in these other states apparently, and the Republicans are encouraging there to be more oversight by private citizens. So
I mean, there should be actually. I think a lot of people should go and volunteer during the election because in Turkey, especially, people take it so seriously because they don't trust anyone. So from every party, there will be volunteers who will go to every district. But there are certain districts where for example, it's more conservative in this area, or it's more liberal in that area. And in the conservative area, there won't be any other parties present during voting. So it's kind of hard sometimes to be sure. And in Turkey, we have 84, 85% voter participation.
Oh my
so
God.
they take it very seriously. And people
that's
do.
sad to me about this country. Especially for minorities whose ancestors were, slaves weren't allowed to vote. I keep thinking of that one movie that it was Lee Daniels, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but it opened with a black woman being forced to recite the preamble to the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence before they would even allow her to vote. And that actually happened in this country, and you would think, based on that, that
Yes.
we would have more.
Yeah.
a higher
And I was also
percentage.
wondering, when you mentioned persuadables, are these people who usually don't vote? Or
Well, according to my research, they're younger people and more racially diverse. They tend to be politically independent, use social media. Pocketbook concerns are important. And I thought this was interesting, a little on the sad side, because they're basically saying these are younger, independent people. And they're more likely to vote about their personal financial, based on their personal financial situation, as opposed to rights and freedoms.
And I think that's what Trump and Vance are counting on, and what you were talking about. That you forgot about what happened during that, because what they keep hammering home is, you were better off during the Trump administration.
Right.
The stock market was doing better. You were making more money, and I hear that. I hear that from so many, particularly men, that I talk to. That.
you know what bothers me about that is they started saying that as soon as Trump took office, like the first day,
Yeah.
the stock market goes up, and everybody thinks, oh, this is because of Trump.
Yeah.
And first of all, not everybody has money in the stocks. And second, I mean, the stock market goes up and down all the time.
Yeah.
And when you put some kind of economic policy, it takes years
Yeah.
to see the impact of it. So if there was anything going well in the first 2 years of Trump, that was from the previous
Yes,
administration.
Yeah.
And I am so amazed how people just contribute that to the president as soon as they take office.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even heard Trump saying that, the economy is getting better because they think I'm going to win. So he's even taking credit
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
before his office. So
Well,
yeah,
the other
it's
thing
incredible.
is that the Fed, and I don't understand economic policy. I'm not an expert, but the Fed has more to do with the economy and inflation and interest rates and all of that stuff than the president does, or even Congress or
Yes.
national government. But economics is a very complicated subject.
We did a
and
podcast on that.
Y-
And
yeah.
that's when, if anybody
don't
listens to that
understand it.
podcast,
Yeah.
the two economy professors from YSU explained how any policy would just start showing its impact over 2 years at least.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, people don't realize that.
Well, and it's hard to understand. I mean, it's unless you study economics,
Yeah.
even educated people have a hard time understanding it. So most folks aren't really going to pay attention to it, except when you boil it down to you had more money in your pocket,
Yes.
or, were you better off
Yeah.
during my administration or the next one? It's going to come down to that.
Right.
Well, I think that we are getting to the end of our time. Usually I've got Bertram and Andy, holding up signs, 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Can I just say one thing though?
So I'm just going to end by asking you guys if there's something that stands out with Vance that you particularly like or don't like, and would you have preferred to see him at the top of the ticket instead of Trump?
Oh.
Taj, you want to go first since you're laughing?
Well, I mean, I see Vance as somebody who just goes wherever there is some kind of benefit to himself. And in that sense, I don't think he's very different from Trump, because I think Trump is all about himself as well. I mean, he wants to be the president, not because he loves this country as he claims, not because he cares about the people of this country as he claims. I think it's all about power. He's going to have power. He's going to be able to talk to all these world presidents and maybe build in those other countries,
Maybe.
expand his own
Maybe,
business.
unless he's convicted, because then he can't go to like 36 countries or something.
I mean, I think that's all about his own business and his own profits and benefits. And seeing JD Vance saying all these things about Trump before, and now he's completely unapologetically like supporting Trump with everything. I don't trust him either.
Yeah. What do you think, Mona?
I don't trust him.
No.
Yeah, I think he's extremely articulate. I hope he's not the future of the Republican Party. I hope that my readings about the Republican Party wanting to regroup and become more of my father's Republican Party, the Ronald Reagan Republican Party, the grand old party. I hope that is true. If he is going to be the new face of the Republican Party after Donald Trump, because let's face it, Donald Trump is 78 years old, then I think that's scary.
He could die in office, Trump.
He could.
He's
Yeah,
one
and-
heartbeat away.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, geez.
And he's
One
opportunistic.
cheeseburger away from it.
And the thing about it is he's very good at being opportunistic. He's very good at it.
Do you think he would change his views if he got to be the president? Because his wife strikes me as someone
who's has
who's
moderating
more,
influence on
who's
Yes.
more moderate than
Maybe.
he is.
That would be good. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. What do you think, Meg?
Oh boy. I agree with what my fellow panelists have said, where that I think he's I don't trust him one whit. I think the whole, coming from my father being a Methodist pastor and coming from the
I forgot
whole,
about that.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so coming from the conservative Christian background and feeling more and more as I see Christian nationalism rise within the country, feeling more as an outsider within my own religion, and then for a long time I was a Republican, feeling an outsider within my own party, to the point where now there was a woman who's coming through our neighborhood and she's like, "Oh, Megan," and I'm thinking, "Oh, woman, how do you know my name? I don't know." She's like, "Just the person I was looking for. I want to talk with you about important issues that are concerning our country." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And she's petting my dog, and I'm thinking, "Woman, get your hands off my dog." And she's like, "Oh, yes." And she's like, "Well, I'm with a Turning Point, I think, no, Americans for Prosperity." And I know immediately,
Right.
and I immediately am thinking, "Oh, woman, you better get your hands off my dog." And she's like, "And I want to know if you're going to vote for Bernie Moreno or Sherrod Brown." I said, "Let me tell you something, woman. I was raised conservative. I was a Republican. I want nothing to do with the Republican Party ever again. If Trump is the future, I'm never voting Republican again." She said, "Oh, okay, gotta go. And I was like, hey, I have found the formula to get them off of my front lawn.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. But I just don't think, number one, I feel like we've forgotten history. And, you know,
Do they even teach that in school anymore?
God, you know, well, they teach a sanitized version of it. And I think they've forgotten why, you know, they want to keep talking about the Puritans and the forefathers. They forget why the forefathers came over here and that England was taxing people if they were not part of the Church of England.
Yep.
And they think that, you know, the people who are in, you know, the Republicans think my version of Jesus is going to be the version of Jesus. And I'm like, do you not realize that there are so many different versions of Jesus within, you know, how do we not know that it's not going to be Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah.
It's not going to be Mormon. Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, and if it's Catholic, are we talking, you know, very Orthodox? Are we talking Jesuit? What are we talking? You know, and everybody thinks that they are going to be the ruling party when there's going to be only a small percentage and everybody else is going to be getting that pew tax again because you either follow or you get, you know, railroaded. And I see it and I just want to be like, come on now, wake up. I mean, your ancestors brought you here to give you opportunities, and not just for you, but for everybody.
And then they wrote it into the Constitution.
Yes, and to give anybody who, you know, feels like they are being persecuted or anything to come to this country, to be able to have equal opportunities, to be able to do, it just ticks me off to see Christian nationalism come in and say, well, you're not an American because you're not white, you don't, you know, worship the way that I do, and I'm going to calm myself down before my Irish roots start taking me off into the stratosphere.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because I've you know, I've been watching this happening.
Yes.
And, you know, the evangelicals were a major support for Trump, but now he's kind of flip-flopping on the abortion issue, so I'm not sure where they're going to be.
Well, it's been interesting. A lot of them went to Kennedy because some of them are realizing, oh my gosh, Trump used us just so that he could get the vote, and now tossing us to the side.
And now Kennedy's supporting
now,
Trump.
Oh, and now they're in a tough spot, and I'm like, haven't learned anything.
Yeah, well,
so it just disturbs me on so many levels.
Yeah, it pretty much disturbs me too. And I have wondered, talking about the Grand Old Party, why the Grand Old Party hasn't, you know, separated themselves from MAGA and given them that name or the Trump Party or something.
The money.
I suppose that it is the money.
Opportunities.
But Ronald Reagan, I have to say, I have younger friends who thought that, you know, he walked on water, but he was the one who broke the union for the air traffic controllers, and we're all paying for it. We've all been paying for that ever since. But I think I would agree with all of you. I don't trust Vance at all.
You know, one big concern I have is education. And I think Republicans are doing a lot of damage to education. And if you have been following the news with YSU and everything, you know, we have a president now who thinks that faculty indoctrinates students.
Right.
And I see parallels in everything with Turkey, and I can't help but compare because that happened in Turkey, and the Turkish president openly said that he wanted to create a conservative nation, and he wanted to basically. This is what the conservatives in the U.S. want to do. I mean, they do want to indoctrinate students at universities.
They want to indoctrinate them to their
into
beliefs,
their own beliefs, and so
in Turkey, is it has it become more of a theocratic nation, or is it still secular?
I mean, it's still a secular country in our constitution, but you know, things are constantly changing, and there are certain religious groups who hold a lot of power in government because, again, you know, it's about loyalty now. It's not about what you are capable of or your qualifications. So there are a lot of positions filled by people who are not experts in that field, but they're just conservatives who support the government. And it's incredible how there are opportunists, like who used to be liberals, but now they act like conservatives to be able to get those positions.
And that's sort of frightening because that speaks to the concept of Project 2025 of getting rid of the civil servants and replacing them with loyalists, you know, who obviously don't have to be experts in their field. And I think that
and that destroys a country, like education,
right.
and supporting loyalists instead of qualified people.
Right.
It really destroys everything over time, and then it takes generations to fix education and to fix that, you know.
to fix anything in government because it works
But
so
education
slowly.
especially takes longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think that we probably all come from a point of not trusting JD Vance since he promised us new steel mills and then Trump did, and now he's associated with him. But so that's our history. Anyway, I want to thank you all for participating in this, and particularly Megan, who's being tasked with everything today since the guys deserted us. So thank you, and maybe we'll have another conversation closer to the election.
Absolutely.
That'd be
All
great.
right. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.